like she wanted to disappear rather than be seen with me. Even as a child, at every family event, whenever my relatives tried to praise me for my achievements, my parents always interrupted and made jokes about how bad I looked by comparing my face to that of animals. They got some uncomfortable laughs since they were the hosts, but the damage it did to me was irreparable. I always thought it was my fault that I was ugly, which led to me developing an inferiority complex. I rarely talked to anyone or participated in any activities at school because of the fear of being judged. One day, my school counselor noticed me sitting in an empty classroom drawing and suggested I participate in the upcoming poster making contest. I said no, and she decided to get to the root of it by talking to me about it. She found out about my issues and called my parents the same day, asking them to get me to a psychologist since their constant criticism wasn't helping. To avoid being called negligent, they agreed to enroll me in therapy. The next few years were good, with me finally being able to build my self-worth with the help of my therapist. However, this didn't change the snarky remarks I used to get from my parents. They made fun of my looks, and when I showed my disapproval, they told me to get a sense of humor. From that point on, I decided I would move out of their house as soon as I turned 18. Finally, my 18th birthday arrived, but my parents didn't forget to make it all about Kelly. Kelly got a modeling gig. Kelly got into a very well-known college. Kelly is the best was all I could hear during the party. It was only my maternal aunt who stepped up and reminded everybody that it was my birthday and maybe we should talk about me instead. Everyone agreed except my family, who didn't like my aunts intervening and stayed quiet during the rest of the party, even when it was time to sing happy birthday. After the party was over, I went to my room and cried. The next day, I called a friend who helped me find a tiny apartment. I had money saved from my part-time job, so finances weren't an issue. My moving out wasn't an issue for anyone in my family. Forget about asking the reason, they didn't even realize I was leaving for good until I started loading my friend's car with boxes full of my stuff. They didn't say much, just the final remark that without me, their house would finally look chic. Kelly was also going to leave for college that year and very unexpectedly gave me a book she liked as a farewell gift. I studied and worked extremely hard that year, realized my passion for software engineering, and fortunately got into a very reputable college for it. I hadn't talked to my parents since moving out, so I decided to go and invite them to my graduation. I reached home to a locked door. I called them, and after multiple calls, when they finally picked up, they told me they wouldn't be able to attend my graduation because they were out of the country on vacation. I thought they might change their minds upon hearing about my admission and offer to pay my tuition as they did for Kelly, but all I got was, "Oh, that's great, good for you." I cut the call and went straight to my aunt's to invite her to my graduation instead. We talked, and I cried a little about my family's distant behavior, and she promised to be there for me from then on. I moved to another city the next month to attend college. 6 years later, I was working for a reputable company as a software engineer and freelancing as a graphic designer. My relationship with my family had been almost non-existent during these past years. I used to only get invited to big family events, only to be made fun of most of the time. So, I decided to stop going after a year. My aunt noticed this and invited me to her house for all the holidays, so it's safe to say I didn't really miss my family. The company I worked at was very chill, with no blatant hierarchy among the employees. Once our company needed someone to redesign their logo, so I volunteered. I was asked to work with a guy from the office I had never met before. Let's call him Rob. Rob and I worked on that project for almost 3 months and became great friends. We started to hang out after work and realized it was something more and finally began our relationship. By the end of our project, I learned that he was actually the CEO and founder of the company, which didn't make much difference because, to me, he was just Rob. After a year of dating, he finally proposed to me extravagantly on a trip to Paris. I was elated, and my aunt was the first to hear about it. The next day, I emailed my family about this and made a Facebook post to inform everyone else in my extended family. Surprisingly, I got a call from my mother for the first time in almost 7 years. She sounded very excited and congratulated me, proceeding to invite me for a private family dinner the following weekend. I thought about it and said yes to her. The dinner wasn't at my house but at a very fancy restaurant. I met my parents and my sister Kelly, who had been between jobs after college. My parents were trying to act very nicely towards me, but I kept my guard up. They asked me about the wedding, and I told them I had no plans yet. This is when they broke character, and I finally realized why they wanted to meet me. They began begging me to include them in my wedding. I was taken aback by this and clearly told them it would be my call after I decided and that they had no right to make demands after being absent for almost 7 years and only showing up when they needed something. They got quiet, and I asked for the bill. I thought we'd go Dutch, but I was then informed that they expected me to pay the entire bill because I was now getting married to this rich guy. I was so done with them at that point that I paid the bill and left without even saying goodbye. I talked to Rob about this, who assured me the wedding would be as I liked, with only the people I'd like to have on my special day. From that day on, I started getting constant calls from my parents, pressuring me to invite them and make them a part of the wedding, since we were family and family came first. I was extremely reluctant at first because of what happened at the last dinner, but on their repeated apologies for their behavior towards me during my childhood and so far, I decided to act like the bigger person and give them a second chance. I told them that Dad could walk me down the aisle while my mom and Kelly could be my bridesmaids, and they were more than fine with it. Things started to go south when they began shopping for the wedding. They got the most expensive stuff from stores and expected me to pay for it. I told them very clearly that I'd send them references to look for and that I wouldn't be paying for any of it. They tried to persuade me by pretending to be nice, but I didn't fall for it and said no. 5 months before the wedding, Rob and I decided to have an engagement announcement first in my city and determine the guest list based on that. So, I invited my family and a good chunk of my relatives to this engagement party. It was well known that since Rob was a CEO, a lot of distinguished guests would be invited to every event. My parents were just happy to be included. At this point, everything was going according to plan until I got a call from my aunt one day, who said she wanted to talk in person ASAP. Now comment update to tag you on part 2.